Welcome to Just to Know You, the podcast that interviews regular people at SAES and finds out they are far from regular.
That's right. I'm your host, Darian Batten.
And I'm Angela Kurskadin.
Let's get started.
Well, welcome to Just to Know You. We are here with Richard Howard, our keynote speaker from our Empower Summit, and we have a two host and one guest today.
Yes, Darian Batten is here. Happy to be with Mr. Richard P. Howard. What does the P stand for?
My great-grandfather was named Barzilla.
There's a name.
He preferred his middle name, Page. So he became known as B. Page, and all the Howard boys since have had the middle name of Page. And we're working on number 7, I believe, at this moment. So
oh, very cool.
I'm number 4.
Awesome. Well, we would love to kind of dig in and ask you some questions about your life.
Sure.
So we found out a little bit in the keynote that you moved to Saudi, but I was kind of wondering about the years in there. So what year did you arrive here and when did you leave?
I'll give you a little stream of consciousness.
Yeah.
Of that, if you like. So my father took a job at Aramco, at least I thought he did, in December of 1954. We were living in Pittsburgh at the time. He left in December. My mother and I left in December of 55, but it took us 4 days from New York to get to Arabia. It took us 2 days from Pittsburgh to New York because we were going by train, and there were other problems. So that brought me to Arabia on January 2nd, 1956.
Wow. Okay,
a date which will live in infamy, to coin a phrase.
And how old were you?
I was 9 years old.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you were here for how many years?
So then I had my first schooling in Dhahran till September of 56, which point I moved to Ras Tanura.
Okay.
And then I had 5 full years in Ras Tanura. Graduated from the 9th grade in 61. And then I went off to boarding school.
Wow, very cool.
And then I came back, I guess, 4 summers after that as well.
Okay.
As a returning student.
Oh, interesting.
Which boarding school did you go to, and how did you adjust after your time?
Yeah, that's a good question. Not a particularly nice question. It's good. So I apparently didn't adjust my first year at ACS in Beirut. And as a result of that, I got to do the 10th grade over in Michigan at a school called Cranbrook, and I went there for 3 years and graduated.
You talked a little in your keynote about how you weren't a great student when you were a child, and you were kind of the class clown. And we know kind of your success in your career. Where was the turning point where you went from the student that needed to repeat a 10th grade to?
Right. So the big step forward in my life came when I got a girlfriend.
Hey.
And I'm really hoping that this podcast won't find its way to the United States because I'm already indebted enough. But she was the top student in her school, and to sort of become marginally attractive to her, I felt that I had to do better, and so I did.
So instead of all these teaching strategies, what you're saying is...
Yes, that is correct. That is absolutely correct.
So was that in high school, though?
I was in high school.
Yeah, and did you say you were in Beirut?
No, I had gone to Cranbrook, which is outside Detroit.
Oh,
and,
okay.
My second year there, I think it was around Thanksgiving, I asked the prettiest girl in school to go to the movies with me.
Yeah.
And she did. And
there you go.
And I can't get rid of her.
Oh, and this is your wife.
This is my wife.
Okay, Richard P. Howard. I see you. I see the other side.
That's amazing. So you and your wife were high school sweethearts.
Yes.
So you've known each other for how many years?
60 years. It seems longer, but...
That's a beautiful story.
Yeah.
How many children do you have?
Two. 2 boys, 53 and 50.
And grandchildren?
5 grandchildren,
Nice.
triplet granddaughters, and
Wow, that's so cool.
17-year-olds, and a 17-year-old boy, and a 14-year-old boy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Now, does your extended family, do they have the same love for travel and experiences
Yeah, good
as
question.
yourself?
I don't think they do. They have certainly some, and they certainly have done some. I would say more than average, but not anywhere near to the extent that I have.
Really? There's a theory out there that if you have like strong roots, you never left a town, then sometimes it pushes you to travel. If you've traveled a lot and you don't necessarily have those roots, then you're more likely to stay within an area to try to create those. So it's almost like the antithesis of what was presented to you.
Yes, I would agree that that's a sensible theory. I don't know that it's applicable ever in my case. I feel that I would like to have the ability to have stronger roots to Ras Tanura. If I could come back to Ras Tanura every year and spend 2 weeks there, I probably would.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't do a thing. I'd just go to the cafeteria and look at the water and have a great time. But obviously my kids don't have that feeling. They didn't have that experience. And I think my father was a good example of your other situation. He grew up in a very tiny town in Maine. He always could go back there. He could always had his roots there, and he didn't really appreciate that I didn't have that ability as an Aramco brat.
Right. Huh. What brings you? You speak of almost this longing to continuously return.
Yeah.
But it's not something that you can kind of put your finger on. What continuously pulls you back and calls your name back to?
I've thought about that, and it's a very good question, which I don't have a good answer for. But I think you have your memories make a place, right? So I have strong memories. Your friends that you've had there make a place. Obviously, they're gone. Your physical relationships with things have a place, give you a place. So Ras Tanura is very, very important because it's the most like it was. Mm-hmm. Dhahran is very different. Abqaiq is different. But Ras Tanura, has the beach. It has the refinery. It has the terminal. Those things are the same. Now, the refinery is like 10 times as big as it was. Yeah. The terminal you can't get to because of all the security. Yeah. But Ras Tanura has that sort of feeling of sameness, and which appeals to me.
Yeah, it's a place of your childhood, right?
Yes.
And had some really good memories.
I have good memories. I have a sense of place.
When you kind of just started to talk about the old Saudi Arabia that you used to see, and I was wondering if you could kind of expand on that. What was it like around here?
Yeah. So I loved the old Saudi Arabia. It's very nice to go to the Dhahran Mall and see all the shops and have everything to want to buy. It's very nice. But I loved the old Saudi Arabia where the likelihood of you being able to buy what you want was very minimal. Right. But it was so fun to look. It was just so fun. And you could go into any shop and the shopkeeper would welcome you. Do you want to give you tea? Now, part of that was because the Americans were the wealthiest people in the place, and an American kid like myself was a potential provider of money. Whereas today, obviously, the Saudis have the money, and the Americans are actually the poorest people here. Nobody lifted a finger when I went into the shops in the Dhahran Mall. But really, the shopkeepers were so nice to me. I mean, I tell the story in my book about trying to buy coins at the different money changers. So if a money changer had a quarter, right? A quarter was worth about a rial back then. But I would offer him 5 gersh. I can't remember what a gersh was worth, but it was like 20 gersh in a rial or something. So I'd offer him 1/20th the value of that quarter, and he'd sell it to me. Why? because he had it was worthless to him. The quarter was worthless to him. It was worth something to me because I was eventually going to go to the States and spend it. I went into a shop one time and I was, bargaining and asking him what stuff he had, and I noticed that he had an envelope on his counter, and it had 4 stamps from Aden. And I said, what is this? This letter has come for you from Aden. And I said, look at those stamps. Look at the pictures on those stamps. Those are really. And he took the envelope and he tore off the corner and he gave it to me.
Really?
And that's they really went out of their way to be nice to this little white kid that was always around. I mean, that's what I was. I was just always around. And as I say in my book, I had become invisible because I was always around.
That's so
and,
cool.
They treated me so well.
Was English ever an issue, or did you pick up more Arabic back
So
then?
the 5 full months that I lived in Khobar, I could scream at people in various languages that were necessary to play soccer, and I knew what they were telling me to do. But I was never particularly good at Arabic. I knew more than most of the Americans, but I wasn't terribly fluent. I can make you think I'm fluent in Arabic, but I'm not really. Yeah. So, but my father, on the other hand, did work very hard and became quite fluent and could read and write Arabic. Which,
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was
very cool.
Quite an accomplishment on his part. So.
I see that you've referenced your book. First and foremost, plug away. Tell us about it.
Shameless plugs. Always welcome.
Yes, well, the book is a must-read.
Yeah.
I consider there to be 3 books that are worth a special plug. And they're all different, and that's why there are 3 books. So the first book everyone should read is Discovery by Wallace Stanger. I believe I'm pronouncing his name correctly. And it does a very good job of talking about the very early days of discovery leading up to Dammam number 7, which was the discovery well. And it sort of looks at this project sort of from a top management point of view.
Right.
The second book that everyone should read is perhaps not something that Aramco would like to encourage. However, it's an extremely good book. It's by Michael Sheldon Chaney, I believe his name is. It's called Big Oil Man from Arabia. And it tells the story from the point of view of just a middle-level Aramco American employee. And he gives a much different feel for what's happening than Stanger's book. And the third book everyone should read, of course, is by far the most important, which is my book, Aramco Brat. And it is a book that looks, at least tries to tell the story through the eyes of a young person, myself as a 9, 10, 13, whatever year old. And I think I see different things than the other 2 books. Other things resonate with me because of how I'm positioned to look at this story. And I think all 3 of those books are good.
I have 2 kind of questions that go together. And the first part is, what made you decide that you needed to write this book? And then the second question that goes with that is, what was the writing process like for you, kind of like emotionally and actually?
Yeah. Okay, why did I write the book, number 1? Well, first of all, I felt there was a lot that I knew that would be lost because I'm 76 years old. There are very, very few adults that are still alive that saw the story that I saw. So I saw it as a kid. There are some kids, but even then, I had a very unique window on this experience. My father was not an in-camp employee. He was an out-of-camp employee. My father was very anxious to include me in all of his experiences. It was very, very, I think he felt bad that he'd abandoned me for, basically 18 months. And so whenever he could, he involved me in things that he was doing. So most Thursdays, which was our day off, I would be with him either all day, or I would go and visit him at his office in Rahima. He worked in Rahima, and would spend a half hour with him, and then I would drive home with him. So I was an out-of-camp kid, very much unlike all the others. Why else did I write it besides that? I wrote it because I suddenly had time to write it.
So you retired from your job?
Well, not totally, but I was locked down by COVID.
Oh, wow. Okay. This is a
And
COVID
so
book.
I wanted to do something productive. It was starting in the second year of COVID, which is basically starting in January of 2021. I couldn't travel. So I wanted to do something, and so I did that. Now you ask about the writing process. But let me continue. So I wanted to get these facts down, which I was afraid would be lost if I didn't write the book. Secondly, I wanted to give Aramco kids at least an inkling of the powerful sense of place that we all have. If I didn't do it, nobody would. Right. So I felt it was, my responsibility. Okay, you asked about the writing process. So I didn't really start knowing I was going to write a book. Right. I was going to write a story of my friend in Beirut. I sort of wrote what turned out to be twice of it. I ended up cutting half of it, but anyway, I wrote that. And then I wrote about my first trip from the United States to Arabia. The 2 days, the day on the train, the trip stopping at all these places, and how excited I was, and what an impact that had on a 9-year-old. And then I got sort of motivated, and I did the hard thing. I wrote about my parents dying in the plane crash, my sister, and that I did sort of because I needed to do it. I needed to get it out. I'd never really dealt with it emotionally, so I cried a lot, and I wrote it up. I had never opened the boxes of my parents' effects that were sent back to me from Arabia after they died. So I felt I needed to do that. So that was the third thing I wrote. And of course, once I did the hard one, then the others came easier. So I worked every day for not quite, I guess about 11 months every day. I worked never less than 2 hours, and never more than 16.
Great. Okay, that's a range.
Yeah.
And how did that? Because even now you can see pieces of the process on your countenance. How did that process change you as far as writing?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Having never dealt with the emotional trauma of it, it was really good to do it. I when I was writing that first chapter, I sobbed quite often. I couldn't help it. I had never told my children about some of the things that happened. I mean, they knew about the crash at that point, but they didn't know about the crash until they were probably teenagers. My wife did, because she was my girlfriend when it happened. So yes, I think it did. It sort of relieved me of a lot of emotional burdens that I've carried for 50 plus years, 57 years, whatever.
So you decide to dive into your psyche.
Yes.
At 74.
Yes.
Why?
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't have done it if, one, I was locked down by COVID, and two, I felt that the story needed to be told. I didn't do it. Well, you may raise an interesting point. Who was the big beneficiary of me doing it? Well, I was, but I didn't even think about that. In fact, if I had known how good it was, I wouldn't have done it because it was too damn painful.
Really?
But once I started, I had to carry it out. So I did.
Really? You wouldn't have done it had you known
no.
it was that painful?
No, it was way too painful. Way too painful. It was better to leave these things trapped in your subconscious and never let them out.
Really?
Yeah.
How do you feel about the world knowing your story, though?
Well, so
It's painful.
yes, very good question. It's very, you feel naked, right?
Sure.
I mean, it's very upsetting to know that people see your pain.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very hard.
Yeah.
But once I decided I was going to do it, I just said I'm going to do it. So again, if I'd known how hard it was going to be, I wouldn't have done it. But I did it.
It's
So
very
I'm
brave.
glad I did. No, it was just stupid. It wasn't brave at all. Not brave at all.
I don't know about that. And if you look at your the pre Rich before you wrote the book, and then after you went through this process in the post, what changed?
So I'm much more willing to be vulnerable than I ever was before. I was always. I don't know how to capture that in words, but I was just I'm Rich Howard. That doesn't matter what you throw at me. I'm going to deal with it. And now I'm a little more humble.
Yeah. And do you
Not quite so obnoxious. Pretty obnoxious, but not quite so much.
Do you like this change in yourself?
I'm dealing with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
There are advantages and there are disadvantages. Yeah. It's a good thing I've got a girlfriend because I don't think I could get another one.
I mean, I think there's a lot to be said because when your parents passed away, what year was that in?
1965. So I was 18.
I mean, who supported you?
Well, I had my mom's younger sister and her husband took me in, and they were very good to me. But I think being an Aramco brat and having lived the 18 years that I had lived at that point really prepared me much more than for a normal kid. I think a normal kid it would have been really hard. But I had traveled the world by myself. I had bought and sold gold coins. I had, I'd gotten in trouble. I'd dealt with being in trouble. These sorts of things. And I think I was basically ready. It would have been nice if I hadn't had to deal with it. But, I was ready to be on my own. I think my father I don't know if he did it intentionally, but I think he was trying to get me to the point where I could be on my own, trying very hard. I mean, I remember saying goodbye to him when I was 14, and he wanted to just shake hands. And I said, no, I'm going to give you a goodbye kiss. That's just...
Yeah. Let's talk about your post-Aramco career. So you went to school and became an engineer?
I got a welding engineering degree and an industrial engineering degree in 4 years.
Okay.
Then I got accepted into the Harvard Business School, and I went there directly from undergraduate, which was quite unusual at the time. Probably still is.
Yeah.
But, I did. I had I graduated with a, cum laude or cum thank you lordy or whatever it's called. So I graduated. I had made a real attempt to be a contributor to my colleges in those years, and I was the president of the Student Senate, did things like that. And so I got into the Harvard Business School, I think probably because I had very nice recommendations and because I did extremely well on the graduate school admissions test. I was extremely good at multiple choice tests. If there's one thing I can do, it's I can take a multiple choice test. And much to my wife's irritation, I took a multiple choice test on some history. I don't remember some history that I hadn't taken a class in, and I got a 700 on it because I can just look at a multiple choice test and I can tell
the
how to
logical.
guess. I can just figure out how the tester, how he is creating his, how he's
It's a
creating
gift.
his questions and how he's creating his answers. I can just tell what he's trying to do. Where am I going with this? Anyway, so I had done very well on the graduate school admissions test. It was in the top, 1% of all the people that took it. I had very high grades, and I had done these student activities that sort of separated me. So I got into Harvard, for which I'm terribly grateful. And then when I got out, I got a job as a security analyst and studying, companies and making investments. And things went from there.
I feel like you really, really generalized that job.
Yes.
Skimmed right over it. Right? Could you give us a little bit?
I have been a professional investor I was paid to do it for 47 and a half years, and then I've continued to do it with my children. So what is that involved? Early on, it was involved usually interviewing managements of companies. I had plenty of times talking to the president of Exxon or the president of Chevron, or although it was Jersey and California in the day, but you get the point. And then writing reports for my bosses to what I thought was going to happen that would be important to the price of securities in the energy area. I wrote many reports referring to Saudi Arabia and oil economics and the problems with refineries. Why couldn't refineries make money? I spent a lot of time writing that up, and as a result of that, then as I got more experience and more competency, I moved up from creating background information to actually making decisions. That took about 5 years, and then I started to make decisions and
But where to invest monies?
Yeah, right, and I ended up working at Fidelity as their oil analyst, and then I went to T. Rowe Price and worked as their oil analyst. Then I became a fund manager at T. Rowe Price, and then I went to the hedge fund in Guilford and totally made the decisions there, and made a lot of money. It was very good.
When you look back on your career, what do you attribute, if I was to say top 3 things that attribute to your success?
I'd say the biggest thing that contributed to my success was my failures as a young student.
Tell me more about that.
So to be successful as an investor, you have to be independent-minded. You have to be convinced that you know the truth and that much of the world around you is either wrong or marginally wrong. Since I always felt as a 6-year-old that I wasn't stupid, that I was smart, but yet everybody treated me like I was stupid. And so I think that's the biggest reason I've been successful, because I had strong conviction in myself, and I could look through what they thought and see the flaws in their thinking. So that's the most powerful. I'd say the second most powerful, by having had the long period of working to create information for other people, it was about a 5-year period, I had learned more about the nuts and bolts of certain kinds of companies that I think today's investor does not get.
Interesting.
So I have when I look at an oil company, for example, I have certain characteristics that I look for, and they're not the characteristics that most people would top of mind character. They wouldn't be top of mind characteristics. They'd be a little bit different. And so I have my own set of sort of benchmarks of value and focus. So that's the second thing.
In education, I would kind of equate that to like a superintendent who's also been a classroom teacher.
Correct.
Right. Yeah.
Absolutely similar.
Yeah.
Absolutely similar. If you haven't been a classroom teacher, you don't know that there's a Richie Howard in the back of the room that you can't call on. Because if you call on him, you've just wasted
disrupt
15 to 30 minutes. Right? You just can't call on that kid. Okay, so that was the second. I think the other thing that's made me relatively successful is I had a very stable home life with my wife and with my children. I always I would not. I don't know that that's third, but it might even be first.
Yeah.
But it's been very helpful to because I've been a workaholic. I've for 40 years I worked 60 hours a week.
Wow.
And when my boys were playing, basketball in high school, I would always come to the games with a pile of reports. And every time there was a break in the action, I'd be reading and working. And if I was writing, I had to write, letters to clients and things like that. And I would work on them while I was watching the basketball games. And I don't think if I'd had the wrong wife, I don't think that would have happened. If I'd had the wrong kids, that wouldn't have happened.
Right.
But the kids helped me a lot. So.
That's
Okay, those are my
amazing.
top three.
Wow. Well, I appreciate that.
One thing that you would change, since you were diving back into your past in some capacities.
Yeah, well, I actually, believe it or not, I would prefer my parents not to die in a crash.
Well,
Right, yeah.
Fair.
Yeah.
Good.
I would change that. But on a more reasonable note, what else would I change?
Well, your decisions and how you've kind of.
Yeah.
Would there be anything?
Well, it'd be tough to say. I don't know that I would change it, but I would have liked. I can see other paths that I might have taken. I don't know that I would have enjoyed them more. I don't know that they would have been better, but I sort of would have liked to find out what was going to happen. So I would have liked to have come back to Aramco and worked. I think that would have been a wonderful thing for me to do. I think I would have really enjoyed it, and I think it might have led to. Who knows?
Yeah.
I feel like we've taken up a lot of your time, and I know you're kind of the star of the show today. So
we need more of that attitude.
So we'll wrap it up here with just saying that this has been such a privilege for us to be able to sit with you and hear your story. And, it's really special for us because we're living here and listening to you talk about it. I was reflecting about when I am 76 years old and what my memories will be from my time here. And it kind of helps me to be present in my time right now. And I really appreciate that. And I can't wait to read your book. It sounds like it's just really honest, and you are a funny guy. And I think you got some really good stories, and I can't wait to read it.
Over the years, I've lost a lot, but never my sense of humor.
Yeah.
I like that. One more shameless plug for the. Give us one more for the
One
book.
more shameless plug.
Yeah.
Okay. That's a really tough question because I've been shameless for the last 6 hours. But I think the most important thing for let's say a non-Aramco person is that there are things in there about the company's early days and the American experience in Arabia that are very, very truthful and that are probably not typically understood. And that Aramco has many flaws, as those of us in this room certainly understand. But this was a very, very enlightened company for its day.
Right.
It did a tremendous job of helping this country and helping its people. I guess that would be my shameless plug.
Yeah. No, I know a lot of people I want to recommend this book to back home because, we live in Saudi Arabia and work for this company called Aramco, and it's not well known as to the average person.
Right. So I have a Aramco license plate on my truck.
Do you?
Yeah. And so people...
Do they recognize it?
No, some of them do, most of them don't.
Yeah.
But sometimes people say, well, what's this license
Yeah.
plate, and I tell the story, and
Yeah.
I tell them to buy Aramco brat, and they don't pay any attention to me, but that's fine. So I'm really proud to be part of this
Yeah.
history
Yeah.
and thing. So
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I've enjoyed my interview.
This has been a joy and a pleasure. And, this is the first interview we've done in person. And I feel like kind of the synergy of being in person is
Love it.
very different than when we do
Love
them
it.
online.
I would encourage you to do that. So suddenly having to do, and by the way, you can cut this out if you want, but
Yeah, sure.
but suddenly having to do Zoom calls with people, you find that you lose tremendously the interaction
Yeah.
of facial. You
Yeah.
still see their face, you
Right.
still sort of feel their body language, but it's nowhere near as powerful as being in their
nuance.
presence
Yeah.
and
I
sort of the unguarded moments
Yeah.
that teach you the little nuances of communication are really extremely powerful. And
100%.
if you had asked me what I was good at as a security analyst, which you sort of did, I would have added that I give great phone. I can get your feelings
Through the
through
phone.
the phone. Most
Oh,
people
man.
can't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So my sons are every bit as good a security analysts as I am, but they don't give good phone.
That's amazing. It's almost like a psychic kind of ability.
It's 50 years of practice.
Yeah. Oh, that's very cool. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
We will send you the link when this comes out for you to listen and share it with everyone you know.
Mr. Richard P. Howard. Thank you for listening to Just to Know You.
We would like to thank our amazing tech man, Mr. Kent Arimura, Sterling McDonald for the podcast music, and the SAES community. See you next time.
If you know anyone who you think has a great story to tell, we would love to hear about it. Please send an email to either Angela, Darian, or Kent.